Chattars, let us begin. Brave friends of mine. Welcome, friends, to another GG stream. GG. Welcome to HealthyGamerGG stream, chat. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist. But just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we're discussed on stream is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is intended to be taken kind of educationally. So if you guys have a concern, a problem, etc., a medical question, please go see a licensed medical professional and ask them. Japanese. Oh man. What are all of the ways that Dr. K can get banned on stream? Okay. So today, chat, we have something cool. Okay, so I've been wanting to do this for a while, and like the problem is that we just have so much stuff going on, okay, chat? We've got like a lot of stuff, like we have a lot of people, and like we want to help people, and like, you know, we talk about things. We had a great conversation on Wednesday. I absolutely loved it. You know, best of luck to Zorian. We had someone come on who had been a part of a cult. Mike bad after clap. Disconnected? Okay, hold on. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that better? Who's the boomer now, biatches? Who's the boomer? You need a little bit of tech support? Maybe try calling Dr. K. He's a tech support doctor now. We ain't doing psychiatry anymore. We're doing tech support, bitches. You guys have audio problems. You'll have video problems. You'll have connection problems. Call Dr. K. He's the tech support doctor. How's that? How's that? Get wrecked, shitties. Okay, so... okay, so... I see that there's been a message held for hostility. Someone has said tech support bitches. And we're going to allow that message because, yeah. Okay, so we should be a little bit more careful with our language, so we're going to try to do better about that, chat. So this is what we're going to do, okay? Today, we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. But actually, we're not going to talk a little bit about meditation. We're going to talk a lot about meditation. So I know that we've had a lot of different stuff that we've been doing for you guys. You know, a lot of people are, you know, we want to talk about interpersonal dynamics. We want to talk about psychology. We talk about, you know, learning how to forgive yourself and let go and like depression and anxiety and all that stuff. We also talk a lot about science, right? So generally speaking at Healthy Gamer, we try to stay relatively like evidence-based, right? So we sort of, you know, we'll teach things that are pretty, you know, reliable from a scientific perspective. And today, we're going to throw all of that out the window. So what I want to share with you guys today is actually like a deeper perspective on meditation. We're going to get to a lot of the roots of meditation, and we're also going to get to like the esoteric stuff, okay? So this is the stuff that like a lot of people don't teach. A lot of people are curious about. Personally, I kind of consider myself a skeptic, so this stuff is not about what you have to believe. Like the problem is that, how can I say this? So there have been a lot of changes in like how meditation has been taught recently. And the interesting thing is that a lot of stuff has been left behind. And so the challenge is that like, I think it makes sense that people aren't propagating like unsubstantiated stuff. But there's a big difference between like propagating unsubstantiated stuff and like completely ignoring that it ever existed. And so what we're going to try to do today is dig into some of the more esoteric concepts of meditation. We're going to talk about meditation in sort of a deeper way. And by deeper, I mean like when Buddha was teaching meditation, like what was his actual goal? People have been teaching meditation for thousands of years. And the people who discovered all these practices, like all of these yoga studios have people doing yoga postures and like, you know, that had nothing to do with looking fit in your Lululemon pants, right? Like that's not what yoga has ever been about. And so somewhere along the way, I think we lost a lot of like important information about the tradition of meditation. I want to share that with you guys today. So a couple of important things to remember. The first is that I'm not necessarily saying that you guys should believe this or you guys should do this. It's just I see a gigantic deficiency in the information about meditation. So a lot of people are interested in the esoteric stuff. A lot of people are interested in the spiritual stuff. The other thing that I'm going to offer you guys is, as we talk about these things, I'm going to share with you what my perspective is on like how this stuff could possibly work. So it's not to say that this stuff does work. It's just sort of like, if we want to be scientific about it, there may be mechanisms. So if these guys have been saying this stuff for thousands of years and they invented meditation, and like if the people who invented meditation are saying it's good for particular things, like we can start ignoring it, that's fine. But like maybe they knew what they were talking about. And so we're going to hypothesize some mechanisms which are really going to step far outside what we know from research. We're going to present a small amount of research today, a tiny amount. But that's just to really indicate how far the research has come. And more importantly, we're going to kind of go to the edge of what the research demonstrates. And then we're going to go way beyond that. So I'm going to show you like where safe waters ends. And then we're going to go into deep waters. Okay? So, questions about that? We good? Chattars? Okay. Let's do it. Cult time. Okay. So first question, I want you guys to just think about this. What is the purpose of meditation? Number one. Okay, see, like, so the first thing that I want you guys to notice is that everyone knows what meditation is, like no one knows what the goal is, right? So let me ask you guys something. What is the purpose of a plumber? Why do we have plumbers? Incorrect. Plumbers are there to pull you out of laundry machines, right? If you're distressed in a laundry machine, that's why you call the plumber. That's what I saw. So I checked into this laundry machine business. I Googled it on Hornpub. And what I saw is that the purpose of plumbers is to help people get out of laundry machines. There may be some plumbing that goes on afterwards with the person who is stuck in the laundry machine. But, so I think this is exactly the point that I'm trying to make, okay? Is that people have forgotten what the real purpose of meditation is. It has nothing to do with depression. It has nothing to do with anxiety. It has even nothing to do with clearing your mind. The goal of meditation is moksha, or enlightenment. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but like somewhere along the way, like we stopped talking about that, right? It's kind of weird. Like Buddha, this guy who started this religion where a lot of people go and they teach meditation to other people, Buddha wasn't teaching meditation so that you could have an empty mind. He was teaching you meditation so that you could be liberated. And what happens, like something really interesting happened, if we look at sort of the process of what happened, like no one talks about enlightenment. Like you can go to like, just Google search, like go look at apps on meditation. Go look at the Calm app, go look at Headspace, go look at whatever, like go look at like Netflix's guide to meditation. Go look at like any blog on meditation. What percentage of people are talking about enlightenment? It's like less than 1%. And it's kind of weird, right? Because that's the whole point. Like for thousands of years, the goal of meditation is to become enlightened. That's why we do it. It's a systematic practice to help you become enlightened. And then for some reason, it was like there was some like massive sort of conspiracy where like, yeah, we're just going to stop talking about that, right? Plumbing is no longer going to be about toilets. It's going to be about, pulling people out of laundry machines now. So this is where, fair question, right? So like people are saying like, what is enlightenment? Like, I don't believe in it, like all that kind of stuff. Those are all excellent questions. But in order to understand those questions and talk about those questions and address those questions, we actually have to like talk about enlightenment, right? So it's like, it's kind of like a weird chicken or egg thing, whereas like, I think the reason that no one believes in it anymore is because everyone stopped talking about it. So let's talk about, why that happened, because it's not actually a conspiracy. So I think it happened for a very like interesting reason, which is a very valid reason. So somewhere along the way, like back in the 60s, there were a group of like scientists who like learned meditation, or people grew up like with the, the yoga wave of the 60s, like people like got into transcendental meditation, all this kind of stuff like back then. And then they had kids who they raised in these traditions. Like this was the birth of the yoga hippie, like back in 1960. And so the birth of the yoga hippie like led to an interest in meditation. And then a lot of people became interested in the science, right? Because people would like do these things, but they're also not yoga hippies. So they're like scientists. So they're like, this is really cool, but there's something to it. So let's study it. So this is where I think we get the birth of mindfulness. So this is the other thing, is we talk about mindfulness a lot. Like we don't talk about meditation. Like what happened there? So what happened is like researchers were sitting down and they were like looking at all these cults in India, including the cult that they were a part of. And they made a really awesome like conclusion, right? They were like, well, like, is my cult the same as this other cult? Like, how can I know if I'm doing transcendental meditation with a very specific mantra, and then there's someone else who's doing like tumo breathing that they learned in the Himalayas where they're going all these different kinds of meditation. Like, how can we study this? Because these things are very different. And so what they concluded is that they were going to try to like look at all of the different meditation techniques. I don't know that this is actually what they did, but I think this is what they did. They looked at all these different systems of meditation. They're like, what is the common element? The other thing that they realized is that there is a lot of weird religious stuff, like cultish stuff that gets associated with meditation. So like, we want to kind of remove that. We want to remove the spirituality from meditation, and we want to standardize it and protocolize it. Right? So like what they did is they like took the fast food approach to meditation. They took all the variety of meditation and they turned them into McNuggets. And that's what McMindfulness is. Mindfulness is the McNugget of meditation. It's like taking this rich and varied tradition and sort of processing it into a uniform thing that like is the same for everyone. Okay? So like that's what mindfulness is. And it's even kind of weird because if you really think about it, the goal of mindfulness isn't mindfulness, it's actually mindlessness. Like the goal of mindfulness is to not have a mind. But anyway, that's just neither here nor there. So this is the thing. So like in that process of sterilization and protocolization, it was fantastic because they wanted to study it, right? So like, how can you say that like tumo meditation is the same as mantra meditation? Like you've got to reduce the elements to their basic constituents. So what they did is they took bread and they took pasta and they took naan and they took rice and they took potatoes and they reduced them, as science does, to carbohydrates, right? And then what we started doing is we started studying carbohydrates, which is mindfulness. And in that process, somewhere along the way, everyone started focusing on carbohydrates, and what we've actually lost is like bread and pasta, and it's like now what you get is you get this tube of carbohydrate nutrient supplement. And that's what meditation apps are. They're like tubes of like straight carbohydrate. There's like all of the spirituality, for good reasons originally, has been kind of removed from it, so it makes it easy to study. And once the studies on mindfulness started to grow, people were like, oh, this is scientifically validated, like let's run with it. And so as we've gotten scientific validation on mindfulness, like meditation has kind of gotten like left by the wayside, right? So that's kind of how we got here. So this is where now I want to share with you guys like some of the more esoteric stuff. So I'm going to pause for a second. Does anybody have questions? Okay. So a lot of this stuff is also, so this is like sort of a taste in a sense of some of the stuff that we're filming. Okay. Esoteric is like secret mystical stuff. No, I don't think mindfulness... Okay, so I'm going to pause chat for a second. So I don't think mindfulness is useless by any means. Like a McNugget is great, bros. Like, come on. Like, let's be honest. Like, it's delicious. It's consistent. The problem is that you can eat a tube of carbs. Like, you can have like carb paste. Like, absolutely, right? It's going to work for your body. But the problem is that there's a lot of variety. There's bread, there's pasta, there's like, there's naan, there's like leavened bread, unleavened bread, there's rice, there's potatoes. There are a lot of different traditions. And the interesting thing is that like some people like rice and they don't like bread, and some people like pasta and they don't like, whatever. And so I think the problem is that as we've propagated mindfulness, like what people do is they'll try mindfulness, but if you really look at it, mindfulness is less than 1% of the meditative tradition. And what I mean by that is like if you look at the origins of meditation, this we do go into a lot of depth in premium content, but it starts with the Tantrics in India thousands of years ago. So the first meditators, theoretically, what they say is that there's this guy named Shiva, who's like one of the 3 Hindu gods. But I think Shiva was like an actual person, and he's the person who apparently like discovered meditation. I think that's probably the closest historical representation of like who Shiva was. So he's a dude that discovered meditation. So he is the one who gave humanity meditation. And then like his followers became tantrics, and we're going to talk about Tantra today. And then Tantra. And then the tantrics discovered yoga. And then there were the yogis. And then the yogis they split up into 4 classes, subclasses. And one of them was Raja Yoga, the king's path or the path of willpower, Ashtanga Yoga. Buddha's teachers were Ashtanga yogis. So Buddha learned Ashtanga Yoga, became enlightened, and then started teaching. Buddha's teachings Buddhism divided into 3 branches. Mahayana Buddhism, which, let me think about, make sure I have this right. Vajrayana, Mahayana, and what's the third one? I'm blanking. I want to just make sure I get these right. Theravada. Okay, thank you. So Theravada Buddhism is based on the Pali Canon. So these are the people that sort of took Buddha's teachings and they follow like his teachings as closely as possible. Mahayana Buddhism is where people were sort of like, hey, there are a lot of enlightened teachers, so we're going to like get the wisdom from people besides Buddha. And that's the Mahayana tradition. Vajrayana Buddhism has to do with Tantra. So it's sort of like Tantric Buddhism. And then within the Mahayana tradition, we have Zen. And within Zen, we have mindfulness. So if you really look at like the vast meditative traditions, mindfulness is like a subset of a subset of a subset of Buddhism, which in turn is a subset of yoga, which in turn was given by Tantra, which in turn was like, and this is not like, I mean, I'm sure that people may like find that offensive if you're, if you're Buddhist, but like, I think like historically, like this is pretty accurate. Like, I think there's, as much as people may disagree with it or like not like that, like, Buddha was like Indian and his teachers were yogis, right? His teachings were not brand new. They were like, he studied with a lot of different people. And so that's really the historical lineage of where mindfulness comes from. Now, there's another question, which is, what is mindfulness? So in Sanskrit, mindfulness has a term called sakshi bhav, which means witnessing attitude. And so if we talk about mindfulness, what it is it's cultivating your witnessing attitude. So there's like, if I'm like, there's my hand, right? I can see my hand. So there's something that's observing. My hand is over here, and like I'm over here, and I'm observing the hand, right? So I'm observing the hand. Then what you can say, so what the yogis concluded is like, if I can observe this is not what I am. Because I could theoretically lose my hand and I'd still be me. Then what they did is they're like, okay, so I could lose a piece of my body and I'm still myself. My body changes and I'm still myself. Like I used to be 2 feet tall, now I'm 3 feet tall, but I'm still me. Then what they did is they like looked at their mind and they were like, okay, like my mind must be me, right? Like my mind must be me. And so, but then they sort of realized, wait a second, but I can look at my mind. And they also noticed that their mind fluctuates. Like my mind is sometimes angry and it's like sometimes sad. So I can't really be anger and I can't be sad. I'm the thing that experiences anger and sadness. So then the question is like, what is I? And so the closer, like the further back you go, the more you get to Sakshi Bhav, which is the witnessing attitude, which is at the end of the day, your truest form of self. Your body changes over time and you're still you. Your mind changes over time and you're still you. So like, what is the part of, like, what is the you-ness that transcends mind and body? And mindfulness is the practice of discovering and being grounded in that part of you. Okay? That's what Sakshi Bhav is. Technically, now let's talk about neuroscience. So mindfulness is a state of mind, right? So it's a state of consciousness. Actually, not mind, consciousness. It's a state of consciousness. So if we think about states of consciousness, we have like, I've had time. So this is old news, if you guys remember. We're going to do this real quick. Okay, so let's talk about what mindfulness is. Chatars. Okay. So remember, you guys may have seen this before, where we have like mind plus minus awareness plus minus. Okay, so like these are the different states of mind. So like right now I'm talking to you guys, y'all are listening to me. This is waking. Okay? So this is the waking state. When I'm not aware and I have no thoughts, that's sleeping. Right? Sometimes I lack awareness, but my mind is active, and that's what we call dreaming. Right? Because like you're not really aware in a dream. Like your mind is functioning, but you don't really have awareness. We also have daydreaming over here. Right? So if we think about the experience of daydreaming, what is that? Daydreaming is like my mind is active, but I don't have awareness. And when your awareness snaps back, that's when the daydream is over. Okay? And now we have this bucket, the coolest bucket. And this is where Sakshibhav lives. Actually, Sakshibhav is maybe over here, technically, now that I think about it. Or Sakshibhav is independent. But anyway. So this is where mindfulness sort of lives. This is where the meditative states of mind live. And this is also where there's like there are a lot of different states of mind here, right? So like over here is maybe the flow state. Like, so there's also like a whole spectrum of different states of mind. Where like the flow state is when you don't have a whole lot of mind, but there's a little bit of it there. Just a tiny amount that's fully focused. So if we think about someone who's highly distracted, they're not in a flow state, right? Like they're highly distracted and their thoughts aren't in one place. When you get just a tiny little bit of mind that's focused on one point, that's a flow state, you're highly productive. And it's because you're decreasing your quality of mind. You're moving in this direction. And then also, so Sakshibhav is the first state of meditation. Okay? That's when the observer exists with mental activity watching things, and then you enter the state of dhyan. So this is a state of consciousness where it's a no-mind state. It's a mindless state. So you're not mindful, you're actually mindless. You have pure awareness. The observer actually melds with the object of observation. And then you have all these different kinds of like nirbij samadhi, and then bij samadhi. You have all these like weird states of like enlightenment. And then at the top you have moksha. So when you hit moksha, you're permanently enlightened. So essentially that when that observer becomes like your most constant and grounded self, then what happens is life becomes a movie. And so this can be kind of confusing for people to understand, but I'll kind of explain it. So, you know, the weird thing about enlightenment, so now people ask like, what is enlightenment? Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So what people say when they're enlightened is that there's a contentment. Okay, hold on. Let me go back to this, actually. So now people ask the question, what is enlightenment? So let's talk about this, okay? Okay. So let's talk about what is enlightenment. So people say like, okay, enlightenment is a state of mind where like you're like permanently happy. So it's not really permanently happy because what enlightenment is a state of peace or contentment, but it's not an emotion. So here's the axis of emotion where I have sadness and I have happiness. Okay? So people think these are fluctuations of the mind, but enlightenment is like a movement that's perpendicular. So it's like peace in spite of happiness and sadness. So people who are enlightened and people who meditate on a regular basis gain detachment from their emotions. So you still experience emotions, it's just they don't bother you as much. So on this direction is suffering. And I know this sounds kind of weird, but like there are some people who suffer despite being like, maybe happy isn't, despite experiencing positive emotions. Actually, you know what's better over here? Is fun. Okay? This is a better way to think about it. So despite experiencing positive emotion, like if I party every night and I hang out with my friends and we have an awesome LAN party and it's like really great, I'm enjoying myself a lot. There's a lot of enjoyment. I'm not feeling sad, but there's this cosmic sense of suffering, like my life feels empty. So this axis of enlightenment and suffering is actually independent of the axis of emotion, because emotions are actually fluctuations within the mind, right? I don't feel sad, I mean, hopefully not, forever. I'll feel sad when something bad happens, and then my mind equilibrates. And I don't feel excited forever. Like, I had this awesome birthday. I remember Christmas Day, like when I was 8 years old, I got Ninja Turtles 2 on the Nintendo system, and I was like the happiest kid in the world. Unfortunately, like that fun doesn't last for decades. Okay? So meditation and the road to enlightenment is operating on this axis. And the weird thing is people say that when you're enlightened, even sadness is enjoyable. There is contentment despite feeling sad. And you may be like, what the hell? Like, how does that work? And it's really, really simple. Okay? Do you enjoy listening to sad music? Do you enjoy watching sad movies? When you listen to sad music, how do you feel? Do you feel joyous and excited? You feel sad, but you enjoy it. How the hell does that work? You guys look at Oscar-winning movies, okay? You look at Oscar, like, movies that win Oscars and stuff, like all these really great movies, and they're filled with negative emotion. Why is it that the movies that we think are the best, like, have you guys seen this stuff? Like, you look at, like, great literature. Holy hell, is that stuff really depressing? No, stop. Focus. Camera. Right? So it's weird. So, like, if you think about what is the difference between sad music, what is it, why is it that you can feel sad when you're listening to music or watching a movie, and you can still enjoy it, but you feel sad and you don't enjoy it in your real life? What's the difference? And what I mean by that is I want you guys to think scientifically about the nature of your mind and consciousness. Absolutely correct. Detachment. Because one person says, because it's not my life. So detachment is sort of like this perspective that you have on it. So when you become enlightened, it's like your life becomes a movie where you can start to appreciate all of the negative things. It's like, does that suck? Absolutely. Do I feel for you? Absolutely. Do I feel that emotion? But there is this overwhelming contentment or peace. And the best analogy I can give you guys is a movie. Because what's the difference between your life and a movie? It's that separation between you and it. Okay? This is enlightenment. And so if you think about even like things like a breakup, right? So like a breakup feels really bad when you first go through it. And then later on, like you start saying weird things. Like, oh man, I'm so glad that relationship ended. It hurt, but I feel so much better now. I still miss them, her, him, whatever. But like it was the right thing. And there's a sense of peace and contentment. And it's like, wait a minute, what? So what is the difference between when you process and like when you're in the middle of it, right? And even the way that I'm describing it is like in the middle of it. That's the whole thing. So that is vairagya. So the process of getting from here to here is vairagya. It is the, oh, whoops. There we go. So this process over here is vairagya, okay? And that's what the goal of meditation is. This is the goal of meditation. Mindfulness is just the first step. Because when you become mindful, you start the journey of all of these other subsequent states of mind. Like, you know, you start over here, and then you kind of go down towards moksha, or I guess go up towards moksha, whatever. And moksha and samadhi is when you temporarily feel this state. And moksha is when you permanently feel that way. And this is also where now we're going to talk like a little bit more about, you know, what are the states of mind. So let's remember that, how can I say this? What do I want to say? Yeah, okay. That thought blew up in the hangar. Okay, so questions about enlightenment. Does that make sense? Do you guys get what it is? Nihilism is not enlightenment at all. Nihilism is completely different. So nihilism is a philosophy. Enlightenment is a state of consciousness. Those are like completely different things. It's like energy and matter. Okay. Enlightenment does come with ego dissolution. Okay? All right, so. Okay, so many questions. Love it. So glad we're doing this, chat. Okay, so I'm going to just pick random ones because I can't answer them all, okay? So, sure, E equals MC squared. Fair point. We'll get to that, boys. Y'all think you guys are outmaneuvering Dr. K, but you're falling into my traps. GG. Okay. Is it even attainable? Absolutely. So, someone asks, what about psychedelics? Great question. So psychedelics also move you from here to here. Okay? So if you talk about the experiences, so I've had several patients who have used psychedelics, and like what they talk about is there's like a shared experience. So someone mentioned ego dissolution, right? So if we look at what is the similarity between psychedelic experiences and meditation, like people will talk about ego dissolution. They'll talk about separating from their life. So what happens in psychedelics is like, so if we look at trauma, for example, so psychedelic therapy can be useful in people with PTSD. And what happens in PTSD is you get trapped within your own mind. So there's like a traumatic event and like it shapes your like personality. It shapes the way that your neurons are wired. And you get so stuck in that traumatic experience. So let's think a little bit about, like a fear of abandonment, for example. And you're so concerned about being abandoned. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be abandoned. 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 Right? So if we think about this, the inside the mind of someone with trauma is like we're in it. I am going to be abandoned. And then when they take psychedelics, what they actually do is like, it's like, this is what goes away. They step outside their fear of abandonment. And then what happens when you do therapy with these people is, I have a fear of abandonment. And I want you guys to like notice, like, what is the difference between these two sentences? Right? Absolutely, I have. And then suddenly the fear of abandonment is outside of you. It's not you. It becomes like a hand. It's like, oh, like, this is my old, like, this is my arthritis acting up. It's not, I am in pain. My arthritis is acting up. So when you work with these people in a therapeutic capacity, like especially this is the samskar-oriented work, what I train people to do is notice that their mind runs the program of abandonment.exe. And abandonment.exe is going to come with emotions like fear and sadness. But when I work with patients, what I try to do is help them recognize that all this crap is working on this axis. And that you are actually up here. So your mind can do whatever the hell it wants down here. And it even gets to the point where the ones who are now in healthy relationships, which thankfully, most of them wind up that way, will even go to their partner and say like, hey, my fear of abandonment is acting up again. And then like the partner knows, because what used to happen is like the fear of abandonment would act up and then they'd like sabotage the relationship. And they're like, where are you going? And the person's like, I'm going to go play D&D with my friends. And then like their partner's like, which friends? I'm like, I've done this 1,000 times. Like, what's the big deal? Like, oh, nothing. When are you going to be back? Oh, I don't know, like 10 o'clock? Okay. And then like when they get home at like 11:30, they're like, where were you? I was playing D&D with my friends. You said you were going to be home at 10. And so like, it's really bewildering, right? Because like the person's like, I'm so confused. Like I've done this a lot. Like I'm not always exactly on time, but we're late for stuff all the time. I'm confused. Like I texted you and you didn't answer back. I was like, yeah, I was playing D&D. Like, I'm sorry I missed your text. Like, what? It's crazy, right? So what's going on is like, instead, like what's happening is when that fear of abandonment wakes up, it starts like the person doesn't know how to communicate to their partner that I'm afraid of being abandoned. But that fear of abandonment manifests. Huh? What the? Okay, I guess we're doing a new one. Okay. That fear of abandonment manifests in all of these weird ways because we don't understand it. So then what happens is we talk to them. We help the patient understand, oh, this is what happens when you feel abandoned. And then what we do is like go to like, and it starts to affect all of our interactions. So once you become aware of the fear of abandonment, then what happens is we go to, like, we can start to recognize its action. So then, like, you start to talk to your partner and you just say, I feel like, you're going to abandon me. And the partner's like, yeah, I understand you feel that way. I don't want to do that. And then they can kind of talk through it. Because once you're aware of it, it's like, we're going to use, detection. The problem is like all these fears of abandonment stuff, they're all invisible. They're like cloaked. It's like we can't detect them and they're just owning us because like we're sitting in their lane trying to farm and there's some like invisible psychological thing that's like beating the crap out of us. We can't detect it. We're like sort of randomly trying to like connect with it with AoE abilities, but you got to right click it down at some point in a dedicated manner, right? And that's what therapy is. Like that's what coaching is. That's what self-reflection is. And like, so you have to like find it and work on it. You can't just like kind of AoE it down like periodically, it just doesn't work like that. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So now let's move on. So, okay. Other questions about enlightenment, attachment, etc. Is enlightenment necessary? Now we get to the fun part, okay? So this is sort of where I'm going to stop talking about enlightenment. I'll answer a couple of questions, but the truth is like this is where things get real weird. Is it necessary? It isn't necessary. It isn't optional. It is already. Everyone's already enlightened. Like it's kind of weird. It's sort of like saying, is gravity necessary? It's like, no, gravity isn't necessary. It is just the state of things, right? Necessity is a construction of the human mind. So like everyone is already what they are. Like we're all enlightened. And this is why when Zen masters become enlightened, they laugh because they're like, this is all for nothing. And if you guys know the story of Buddha's enlightenment, like his story is really indicative of this, is he tries really, really hard to become enlightened. And you guys, okay, story time. So he tries really hard to become enlightened. And apparently one of the key ways that people would like become enlightened is through ascetic practices. So ascetic is like self-deprivation. In Sanskrit, that's called tapasya. So these are things where people would like fast for really long periods of time. And then they'd like, and the interesting thing is that there's even like neuroscientific evidence, for example, that spiritual experiences in meditation are due to very high levels of CO2 in the brain. Now, normally when you have high levels of CO2 in the brain, it can be like damaging or toxic. It's actually one of the ways in which people commit suicide. So, be careful, don't play around with this. But what people have hypothesized and to a certain degree discovered is that when you have like people who are very experienced at meditation for years and years and years, what they find when you study people who are regular meditators is they have a very low respiratory rate. When you have a very low respiratory rate, it actually increases your CO2 level a lot. When you have an elevated level of CO2, your brain starts like literally malfunctioning. And it is in those malfunctions that people have trippy spiritual experiences. And that probably what happens, I know this sounds kind of weird, but in psychedelics, like psychedelics cannot create a new experience. It sounds a little bit strange. I want you guys to understand that no psychedelic can make you fly. It's just not physically possible. All psychedelics do is activate your existing brain, right? So like if we think about biological substances like alcohol or whatever, caffeine is a chemical compound that doesn't change your brain. It just turns it on in a particular way. So if you look at MDMA, you look at psilocybin, you look at LSD, these compounds travel to your brain and activate your brain in an unusual way, which means that theoretically anything that a psychedelic can do, like, we can sort of do without it. Theoretically. that may not precisely be true. But if you look at marijuana, for example, we have endogenous cannabinoids, right? So we have cannabinoid receptors in our brain. And so like marijuana activates the stuff that's already there. Like if you feel euphoric and chill when you use marijuana, like you can also feel euphoric and chill without marijuana. Like everyone's experienced that. But it's just way easier to consistently get to that state because you're artificially flipping a switch, which normally requires like a certain circumstance to flip. Okay? So if we look at the mechanism of spiritual experiences, it's probably, this is why also like if you talk to people who have spiritual experiences in meditation. Like when I talk to people who like, I've never used psilocybin or LSD or anything like that. But like when I talk to these people, like I understand exactly what they're talking about. They're like, yeah, I felt like connected with the world. And like, I felt like I was seeing like these people from another dimension. I was like, yeah, I know what you mean. Right? It's kind of weird because the brain has to be capable of that experience in order for you to have it. Like that's just, it's a restriction of the sign of like reality. Okay. So, Where was I? Okay. Is there a dark side of enlightenment? No, there is no sides. There are no sides of enlightenment. Enlightenment is so the state of enlightenment can best be described in Sanskrit with neti neti. Neti neti means not this, which means if there is any word that you can use to describe it, that is not what it is. So the state of enlightenment, if you can use a word, is it dark? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it light? Is it heavy? Is it here? Is it there? Was it there? Is it now? Is it before? Is it after? All of those answers are no. It is without quality. It is your most basic level of existence. It's just isness. Isness. The quality of it, the fundamental quality of existence. Okay? It just is. Absolutely. Is enlightenment indescribable? So this is where Twitch chat likes to be clever. They're like, ha, Dr. K, is it indescribable? To which I respond, no, it is not. Neti neti. It is not indescribable. It is neither indescribable or describable. Those are both polar ends. They're both qualities. Ha ha, Dr. K. So enlightenment is that which is indescribable. Enlightenment is that which is not indescribable and is that which is not describable. Okay? Now we get to the next important question, which is like, okay, so you guys can ask all these questions. It's fine. At some point, it's just not going to be useful anymore. So the key thing is, like, if you want to understand what enlightenment is, remember, it's a state of consciousness, right? So I want you guys to understand that when we use words are mental functions. They're concepts. They're ideas. They're things within the mind. The whole point of enlightenment is that it exists outside of the mind. So you can talk about it as much as you want to, and this is part of the reason why I suspect that people don't talk about enlightenment. Because talking about it, you're never going to get there. It's sort of like, talking about enlightenment. I saw a question. I don't mean to be shaming towards someone, but someone asked, can you talk about Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism and their different perspectives on enlightenment, which is a fair question, okay? But I also sort of think that talking about the different perspectives on enlightenment is like a bunch of virgins like arguing over what the best sexual position is. That ultimately, like, there are all these theories, like, people will have religious debates, like Hindus will debate the Buddhists, and they'll say, like, this is the nature of existence, and the Buddhists will be like, no, this is the nature of existence. So I'll give you guys just a classic example. So the Hindus believe that we have a soul that carries our karma from one life to the next, that you have a body and a mind, and that you have a soul that is like sort of unus that transcends one life. The Buddhists believe that there's nothing that transcends one life. There's just this like huge force of karma. So like, it's not that you exist, but that if you like do something good for the world, that karmic propagation, like it's just a propagation of your energy, which is dispersed into different ways. So in the same way that like my body is made of stardust and then I'm going to be worm food and then I'm going to turn like the carbon molecules in my body will one day be a flower. So that is me propagating forward, not as a meanness, but like there are pieces of me that will continue to exist. And they believe the same thing about the energy, right? That like the deeds that I do aren't tied to my Atman or my soul, but just get like propagated out in like an energetic form. And the Hindus are like, no, you carry your karma with you from life to life. I mean, it's all just like different ways to slice one thing. It's like, virgins arguing about their favorite sexual position. At the end of the day, enlightenment is an experience. So like once you have it, once you have samadhi, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you guys have had enlightenment, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Or samadhi, which is temporary enlightenment. Okay? So this is where ultimately what we're going to talk about is like, we can talk about it, but now what I want you guys to do is go and experience it. Don't trust me. I mean, trust me enough to, by all means, explore. But don't take my word for it, because ultimately, like, we're not here to have you take my word for things, as much as I know that y'all think we're a cult. What we're actually here to do is equip you guys with the knowledge to go and like propagate your life, right? We want to equip you guys with the tools so that you guys decide what is real and what is fake. You decide what is good for you and what is bad for you. Okay? Alrighty. Now, we give you guys options. So, esoteric stuff is what we're talking about today. So now that we've had a couple of basics about meditation, I can tell you guys about Tantra and Mantra. Like when these tantrics, when these people like instill with people phrases of power. And so like my guru initiated me, and this is really cultist kind of stuff, okay? So it's like spiritual tradition. It's not really cult, it's a spiritual tradition, which sometimes is a cult. But there's a spiritual tradition that like I had a teacher who like initiated me into like a secret practice. And then there are some people that I have initiated into that secret practice. And so interesting, I'm doing an experiment right now with I won't tell you guys, but okay. So we're gonna see, I'll tell you. All right. So we can still talk a little bit about I'm not gonna say. Okay. So we're gonna talk a little bit about we can talk about mantra and how that works. Like, what is the system behind like, all the secret stuff is fine. Like, I don't really care about that. The question is still from a scientific perspective or a skeptical perspective, what is the mechanism through which this stuff works? The mystical overtones and the secret initiations and all that kind of stuff is like fine, whatever. But at the end of the day, as a scientist, if we assume, I know it's a big assumption, but even if we assume that the mantra works, there has to be a mechanism through which it works. And so I think we can talk a little bit about that. I think it'll be a good discussion. Or we can talk about chakras. What do you guys want? Mantra and Tantra, or chakras? Chakras. We have anyone to do poll? Okay, seems like people want more chakras. Okay. I can't tell, chat. It seems like people were saying chakra first, but now they're saying mantra. Okay, well, let's just start with mantra. Okay. Oh, there we go. Thank God. Whew. It's close. Ooh. And mantra and tantra take the lead. Okay, so we're going to do mantra because also chakras are sort of dependent on mantra, okay? So, if you guys understand mantra, it'll be easier to understand chakra. So now we're going to go to... Oh man, it's close. Okay, Okay, great. So we're going to talk about mantra. So, a little bit of history. I imagine there's a vacuum cleaner. Okay. Oh no. Okay, let's talk about mantra. So now we go back to this. Voices. I hear voices, chat. Oh, whoop. Chatars. Leaked. All right. So let's remember that the tantrics started out, right? And the tantrics actually made Kundalini yoga. And then Kundalini yoga is where the chakras come from. Okay? Can you all hold on a second? I'm going to see if I can figure out what is going on with that noise. Okay, we're back. All right, so it was actually pretty sweet. My 6-year-old was trying to clean up after lunch, which was like, definitely something we want to reinforce. Look, suggested titles, Chalarus. What? Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about the tantrics. All right, so now I'm going to ask you all a question, chat. Let me think about how to phrase this. What is the nature of existence? Like, what's at the bottom? Like, what exists? Okay, so let's not troll. What do you guys know exists? Okay. Okay, cool, right? So there's thoughts. Absolutely. I know it sounds weird, but we're going to put all this together. Okay, so energy, what else? What else exists? Gravity, absolutely. What else? Awareness, sure. Elements, absolutely. Neurons, sure. Okay, so I know it sounds kind of weird, but this is the way to do it, okay? This is how we're going to do it. Like, y'all can troll and y'all can meme and whatnot, but like, I honestly want you guys to do it this way, because this is like actually what exists. The yogis did this, and they noticed that there's stuff, right? So there's matter, right? They're like, oh, there's like physical stuff. And then they noticed that there are forces. And you guys get how like forces and matter are like different buckets of stuff. Like elements like carbon and oxygen are related to neurons. Neurons have carbon and oxygen in them, right? And like carbon in turn has like protons and neutrons and things like that. So these things have like mass. And then there's like a different quality of stuff because there's no way to turn gravity into a neuron. Like forces are fundamentally different from matter. And then they also noticed like, oh, there's energy. And that's like fundamentally different from like matter. And then they noticed that there are thoughts. But if you think about it, like, sure, we can say scientifically that a thought is generated by a neuron, or that a thought has, this is really the precise way I'd put it, has a physical correlation within the brain. But the quality of thoughts, like the stuff of thoughts, is different from the stuff of matter. Does that make sense? We'll get there, chat. We'll get there. Okay. So they're like, okay, thoughts are different, like emotions. And then they also notice that awareness is actually different from thoughts. So that a thought is a discrete fluctuation in the brain that comes and goes, but that the quality of awareness, they posited that the quality of awareness is a fundamentally different bucket. Like there's stuff, like there's like, you know, pens, right? This is matter. And then there's like thoughts in my head, and then there's an awareness that is actually independent of that. So it's kind of weird. So I encourage you guys to like look within yourself and ask yourself, it's kind of a weird question because we're not really like taught to think this way. What we're taught to do is we're taught to be taught instead of taught to think. So I encourage you guys to like think on your own and ask yourself from a qualitative phenomenological perspective, is the stuffness of awareness different from the stuffness of thoughts? So is one person's asking, is awareness not thought? That's a question you need to answer. Okay? So ultimately what the yogis somehow figured out, or the tantrics, is that there's matter, and that inside a certain amount of matter is an exponential amount of energy. So they basically were sort of saying something like this, right? So for you know, you can take matter and the conversion thing is like is there's an exponential relationship there. And then they also made this other kind of conclusion. So this we can kind of agree with. Sorry. To stick with our in consciousness, there's an exponential amount. Oh shit, this is bad. I messed up. So I'll just do it just the equation way. So that if we take a unit of consciousness, that's capital C, we're going to get like some kind of energy and then some kind of variable squared. This was the second equation that they came up with. And what they believed is that the fundamental unit of existence is consciousness. So this is something that they called Brahman. So like there's just a C of Brahman. And Brahman is also cosmic consciousness. Carl Jung talked about it. And that essentially what happens is that Brahman coalesces into some amount of energy, and then energy coalesces as some amount of matter. And that if you liberate matter, you'll get more energy, and if you liberate energy, you'll get pure consciousness. Okay? Now, this is kind of weird. I know it sounds weird. I'll try to get you guys a proper citation. They believe that the universe came out of this point called Bindu Visarga. And Bindu Visarga is, I shit you guys not, a point of immense, infinite density of consciousness that when it explodes, no, it sounds weird, explodes, creates the universe. That there is a point of infinite stuff, and that there's an explosion, and that which lacks quality, so remember when we were talking about neti, that Bindu Visarga, the quality of Bindu Visarga is neti. It doesn't have quality. And then there's this explosion, and then things start to have qualities. It is through that explosion of non-qualified stuff that stuff starts to differentiate into like matter and energy. That is Bindu Visarga. Now this is where things get really weird. Apparently, Bindu Visarga is situated at the top of your head. So each of us has a Bindu at the top back of our head. And when our Kundalini energy reaches the top back of our head, we become enlightened. I don't quite know how those concepts relate. Like, I still haven't figured out that. But I think it's weird, okay? So, Bindu Visarga explodes. Now, this is the other thing that they said, that Brahman oscillates at frequencies. And depending on the frequency it oscillates at, it creates a different manifestation. So frequency 1 makes matter. Frequency 2 makes energy. Frequency 3 makes gravitation. Frequency 4 makes thought. And so on and so forth. Okay? So now we get to like when people say Om is the fundamental vibration of the universe. Like, let's talk yoga hippie. What is Om? Om is the fundamental vibration of the universe, man. If you chant it, you'll be in tune with the moon and cycles, and everything will be beautiful. It's the fundamental vibration of the universe. Incorrect. Like, that's what it is, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So there's harmonics, and Brahman oscillates at different frequencies. The most fundamental harmonic is Om. That is the representation that they use to describe the fundamental harmonic of the universe. Then there are these 12 things called Bij mantras. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but these are like the notes of the universe. Hum, Lam, Vam, etc. So you know it's kind of weird. Like, I know it sounds weird. Like, you know how there's like a limited number of keys? Like, what's up with that? Like, isn't that really weird if you think about it? Like, a limited number of notes, and then you can like shift the keys and you can shift the octaves, but there's like a limited number of notes, right? Like, you go through like B, C, C sharp, D, E, F, and then you move up one octave, and it's like, it's not G, or I mean, it can't be G. So it's not like X, right? What it is it's like C one octave higher. So it's kind of weird. Like, it's really weird if you think about it. Like if scientifically, like, you know, it's not like matter loops around, right? Like, you can have 1 pound and 2 pounds and 3 pounds and 4 pounds and 5 pounds, and it goes all the way up, all the way to infinity. But sound has this strange looping quality, which the skeptic in me says that sound actually doesn't have that quality. That is our ears, that is our biology being restricted by what our biology is able to detect. So it's not actually that there are only a certain number of notes. It's that something about the way that our ears function translate like a bunch of different notes into like certain, like we block it up, right? So there are lots of frequencies of light, but we sort of describe particular ones because, you know, that's just the way that our brain works. For example, like purple is a non-spectral color. There's no actually spectrum of light that is purple. Our experience of purple is our brain's way of interpreting certain kinds of spectrums of light. It's not a real thing. So you can make that argument. It's one that I've made myself, okay? So this is just what they thought. So they sort of said that, oh, like the universe vibrates at certain frequencies, and oscillations at different frequencies result in different stuff, okay? So like, this is also where, you know, a lot of the yoga hippies, and I myself have been guilty of this in the past, have looked at this and have said, oh, like this is like, so what quantum mechanics is saying. So also, this is kind of interesting because Advait, this neti thing actually has a lot to do with interesting principles of quantum mechanics as well, which is that like, quantum mechanics is weird because there are certain like qualities that you can't really hold things down to, right? This is also where like Schrodinger's cat. So anyway, so this is where like, what Brahman is like a great potential. So the yogis actually believe that the universe exists as a probability waveform. This is what Brahman is, right? So when I say probability waveform, you remember how we were talking about how the universe is formless, like Brahman is neti. So what is that? Like, I think that's a way of translating into a probability. It doesn't actually have a quality. It is a potential of all of the things. And then through the focused consciousness, so when we like collapse it down, it becomes a reality. So this is where, you can like sort of talk about things like the observer effect and Schrodinger's cat and stuff, that the act of observation causes a potential to collapse down into a reality. That's what Schrodinger's cat says. Now, this is kind of interesting, right? Because it's like you could make the argument that like, oh, like yogis have been saying this about modern physics, like the Bindu Visarga stuff. I'm not kidding, guys. I'll try to find you a good reference, but I encourage you guys to like just literally read about Bindu Visarga from like texts that are 4,000 years old. And y'all tell me like, if that sounds like the Big Bang, bros. Like, it's really what it sounds like to me. Now, here's the counter argument to that, right? Because remember, we want to be skeptic. We don't want to be yoga hippies. So this is where, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a quantum physicist, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this stuff? Because like, doesn't Schrodinger's cat, doesn't this sound like Brahman? He's like, yeah, it sounds like it. Absolutely, bro. But physics is about math. And like, unless you can show me the math, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because physics is ultimately about reducing things to like observable phenomenon. And so none of the yoga hippies know how to do that. So it's like, okay, like show me the math and then I'll be convinced. Like show me the math. Fair point. Okay. So let's like keep that in the back of our mind. So the universe exists as a probability waveform, and this is Brahman. And then what Brahman does is like it oscillates at particular frequencies that sort of collapse down into reality and create everything from gravitational forces to matter to energy. Okay. So now we get to mantra. Because they sort of posit that we are a piece of Brahman. Okay, so when people say like, oh, like, like we are divine, like we are all divine, like, oh my God, there's a piece of the infinite inside you. So let's not pay our mortgages or our bills and let's just use drugs and have sex because we are like a piece of the infinite. Make love to me. Right? So this is what happens with the yoga hippies. It's like, oh, down with capitalism. Money is terrible. Can I borrow $20? Okay. So we're a piece of Brahman. So what does that mean? So as we become enlightened, so this is me. Okay. This is me like trapped in my body. Trapped in the body. Oh my God, let me out, chat. Let me out. Okay. No, I mean, I'm not trying to trigger the commies or socialists or anyone. Like, my personal political leanings are, quite socialistic in a lot of ways. What I have an issue with is people who forsake personal responsibility for the sake of spirituality. What I have an issue with, and these people I'm happy to upset, is people who are like, I want to live in the moment, which allows me to be an asshole and hurt other people. Because in the moment, I know we're in a committed relationship, but in the moment, I feel like, doing something else. And sleeping with someone else. And I think it's like, fine, if you guys have an open relationship and that's what everyone talked about at the beginning, totally cool. But, in the moment, I don't feel like paying you back, bro. Like, I don't feel like it, so I'm not going to do it. I don't think that spirituality should absolve people of personal responsibility. That's what I take an issue with. The rest of it is just memeing. Okay. And I see that far too often. So, we're trapped in our bodies. And the idea is that, like, there's Brahman over here. And so if we think about the road to enlightenment, it's this way, right? So, like, we talked a little bit about, gaining distance. And then we can begin to see, oh, our life is a movie. Which means that, and people may say, like, oh, if I start to see my life as a movie, does that mean I stop caring? And not at all. See, this is what you guys have to understand. When you gain vairagya, you'll understand this. is that like, do you stop caring about what happens to the people in the movie? Not at all. You care a ton about what happens to the movie. But whether they succeed or they fail, like, you're with them every way, right? Like, you don't want the movie, like, if I just, like, the movie is suspenseful at 45 minutes, I just turn it off. It's not like you're like, you want to watch the end of the movie, you want to see how things go. You're still invested in life. It's just interesting because you start to enjoy all of their successes more, and you enjoy all of their failures more. And that's how it is with your own life, where you're like, yay, like, good job, Alok, like, good job. And like, oh my God, like, oh, I just got demoted at Harvard Medical School, which is in the process of happening. Wow. And it's like, good job, Alok. You got demoted at Harvard Medical School. Yay. Okay. So as we get closer and closer to Brahman, then what happens is like we start to access like this fundamental like creative power. So like what happens is you enable dev mode. So this is what I describe it as, right? So it's like you enable dev mode when you're like operating on the level of Brahman. And when you enable dev mode, you can like start to do whatever you want to. You can be like, okay, like, you know, like in Valheim, like, you know, if you want to be, I'm a cheater. And then you just like add spawn codes. And you're like, okay, like I'm going to concentrate, like I'm going to direct the consciousness of like the cosmic consciousness to like give me stuff. Now we get to the mysticism of Tantra. So what Tantra posits is that we have all these Bij mantras, which are the fundamental oscillations which like lead to reality. So when I put an Om together with a Lum and a Hum, I'm going to get this kind of manifestation. I'll get this kind of gravity. I'll get this kind of like energy. I'll get this kind of stuff. And by combining all these Bij mantras together, what we're doing is like working on these fundamental, it's like we've got Legos now. We're in dev mode and we're going to chant this stuff and we're going to cultivate this kind of energy and then it's going to manifest in the world. So that's the idea behind a mantra. And now we get to a couple of interesting things because people are like, isn't that sounds like BS to me. Like that sounds like it's BS. Completely agree with you. But be open-minded, okay? Like law of attraction, absolutely not. So now this is the big problem, is that this principle has been understood by a lot of people. Like you'll see this in The Secret, which is that book that Oprah made really popular. You'll see this in stuff like law of attraction, sort of. But the biggest problem with all of the Western takes on this is that they're all operating within the mind, right? So like this is where like we have the power of positive thinking. But if I tell myself, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, like it doesn't work, bros. Like it doesn't work. And the problem is that using mantra is not actually operating at the level of the mind. This is where positive psychology, law of attraction, telling yourself things, power of positive thinking. Personally, as a psychiatrist, I detest the power of positive thinking. I find it to be one of the most consistently invalidating things you can do to yourself. Like if you feel terrible about yourself, like if you feel terrible, and then you go on telling yourself like, oh, I'm a good person, like I'm a good person. Like if you just like fight in your mind with the feeling of terribleness versus like forcing yourself, telling yourself, trying to convince yourself that a good person, I don't think that works. My approach is to acknowledge the badness, because as you get underneath the badness, you'll actually find that you're divine. All the way down at the bottom, you're going to be divine and perfect. And so you don't need to like convince yourself of anything, because that just creates problems in the mind. It's like, you know, if we think about it, like what is validation? If your friend says like, oh, I'm ugly, and like, you don't say, oh no, you're beautiful. Like you can say that if you want to, like it's nice in some ways, but it doesn't change their thinking, right? The question that I would use is like, why do you feel that way? Like, I don't think you're that way, but what's more important to me is like, who the hell cares what I think? Like, why do you think that? And when did you start thinking that way? And then you talk to them about it, right? And then you kind of like get to like, okay, like you believe that way because of this one incident that happened in 7th grade. And I can understand that hurt, but like that's not, I don't think that incident defines you. Do you think that incident defines you? And as you face the negativity on the inside, you don't just sprinkle positive thinking on top. It's like, you know, it's like the European method of like, you know, dealing with cleanliness, which is to slather perfume on top of it. Maybe the Indian method, I don't know. But like, it's like you can cover things up from the top, or like you can actually like clean it underneath, right? So it's sort of like, this is where Yes, I didn't mean to offend the Europeans. It's just a joke that my friends and I used to have, which is probably a little bit racist, so I'm sorry. But going back to, the power of positive thinking is all acting within the mind. Okay? Okay, so let me go back to this. Okay, so let's talk about power of positive thinking and how mantra works. Okay. Oh, damn it. Leaked again. Okay, so like there's mind, right? So when I tell myself something, so positive thinking happens here. And now positive thinking can have utility. Don't get me wrong. It can have utility, but it happens within the mind. Mantra actually operates out here at the level of consciousness. And if you guys remember, you remember that like consciousness and mental thinking are different. So the goal of mantra is actually to like function out here. Now the idea is that when you enable dev mode, right, over here, that like stringing these om, lum, hum together in particular ways leads to particular manifestations. So let me think about what I want to say. Yeah. So the goal of mantra is not about like cultivating a particular thing within your mind. The goal of mantra is to do something outside of your mind. And the tantrics claimed that they figured out what the coding text of dev mode is. So if you think about, like enabling cheat codes, like in Valheim, for example, because I haven't played that recently, but, if you think about like enabling cheat codes, there's a particular syntax to create a particular manifestation. And so what mantras are those are like the syntax that like the universe uses. And so the idea is that when you use that syntax in a state of consciousness, pure consciousness, that creates manifestation. And so this is where you may say like, okay, like let's think about law of attraction and stuff like that. So I want you guys to really think, I know this sounds weird, but I want you to think about, I'm going to ask y'all, when you're successful, what makes you successful? Press X to doubt. Beautiful. Let's do it. We're about to do it right now. Okay. Right, so it's kind of weird. So like the first thing that I want to like acknowledge is that a lot of people have a lot of different answers. But, okay, I'm going to ask you guys another question. Is there order to the universe? Okay, so so I believe that there's order in the universe. And I think that, like, here's my argument for believing that, is that, like, we have science, right? So we know that, like, if I, speaking of which, so, like, there's theoretically a principle upon which, don't zoom out, damn you. There's theoretically a principle upon which this camera focuses. And it has, like, particular principles that it adheres to. And so I'm a scientist, and I believe that there's order in the universe. Like, I think that, like, gravity is, like, a pretty consistent thing. Okay? Now we get to sort of an interesting idea, which is, like, where does the order end and the chaos begin? And I don't think that the order ever ends. This is my personal opinion. I don't think it ever ends. I think that, like, it doesn't make any sense to me that there are laws for some things in the universe and there aren't laws for other things in the universe. I think science has basically shown us this, because that's what we used to think, that's what we still think. We sort of think that there's this arbitrary line where order breaks down, and then it's just chaos beyond that. And the interesting thing is that that line has been changing depending on scientific advancement. So, like, thousands of years ago, there was, like, Zeus with lightning, right? And so, like, oh, like, people would look up into the sky and they'd see, like, lightning. They're like, why is that happening? And, like, it's rando, dude. There's no way to know. It's Zeus. There's this guy up there. And when he feels like it, he pisses on us. When he feels like it, he throws thunderbolts. And then, like, science has been, like, eating away at the barrier of chaos. And is, like, turning more and more stuff into order. You know, it's like now when we have, like, chromosomal abnormalities, like 1,000 years ago when you had a chromosomal abnormality, like Patau syndrome or Down syndrome. And people were like, you know, the ancient Greeks were like, when there was a kid with Down syndrome, they'd be like, oh yeah, like, why is this child this way? Oh, he's, like, blessed by the gods, or he's cursed by the gods. It's It's like they're those dudes up there in the sky, like there they are again, just randomly injecting chaos into our life. Nothing we can do about it. And then science discovers trisomy 21. Right? Now we know, okay, trisomy 18. You know, like we know that there's these chromosomal abnormalities. That's why stuff happens. So if you look at the history of humanity, what we're doing, whether it's fire, lightning, medicine, gravity, you know, why are there stars in the sky? Oh, it's because like these souls like travel up and they like live there forever. Oh my God. So beautiful. No, it's like there's like, you know, balls of gas and there are explosions and suns and like, you know, like stars, like you know, we know stuff, right? So if you look at it like logically to me, this is just my conclusion, so I encourage you guys to agree or disagree, is that like basically like, you know, everything used to be chaos over here and order over here. And like each year that goes by as we human beings discover more, like we're discovering more and more stuff about the nature of the universe. Now, some people may say like, oh, like if you look at on the quantum level, they're like, you know, it's disorganized. Like you can't ever know. It's completely chaotic. And that's to where I say like, yeah, but we've thought that about literally 95% of what we know now. And so I think it's like, it's just a matter of time before we figure it out, because I don't know that we've hit the frontier of knowledge. We've thought that we've hit the frontier of knowledge over and over and over and over and over again. And even like quantum mechanics has a certain like predictability to it, right? Sure, there's randomness within it that we don't quite understand yet, but we can still make predictions. And that's why like people are trying to figure out quantum computing and all this kind of stuff. We can still leverage the order of the chaos to like make computers. It's kind of weird. So what the yogis, the tantrics believed is that this order exists. And when you go all the way back to the beginning, the root of the order is these bij mantras. And that when you look at something like success, it's not one thing. Like success is an amalgamation of different factors, right? It's like a little bit of luck, which the tantrics called karma. And it's like a little bit of personal intention. And this is where I'd argue that intention and like focused consciousness is the thing that correlates with success the most. It's not desire. Like I could want things until I'm blue in the face. But like the people who are successful are the ones who like take their consciousness, not their thoughts, and they point it in a particular direction. And then the thoughts follow. The ones that are able to get their thoughts to follow. And then like stuff from the outside of you happens. Your karma, you get lucky. It's some amount of intention. And if your intention, I know this sounds absolutely weird, okay? But like I've just had this conversation with too many people where sometimes like, you know, I'll talk to someone who's like in a relationship and I'll ask them, like, I know it sounds weird. Sometimes I'll ask them if they're like, usually these are people who are married and have been together for a while. I'll ask them a weird question, okay, chat? I know this question sounds completely unscientific, but I'll ask it and goddamn, does the answer make sense to people? I'll ask them, did you make your partner fall in love with you? And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, absolutely. I'll just ask them weird ass questions. Did you manipulate the universe to like end up with this person? And then sometimes they're like, you know what? No one's ever asked me that, but absolutely. That's absolutely what happened. I know it sounds weird. Like, do you guys know what I'm talking about there? Does anyone understand what I mean? Like, because some people, like, know what I'm talking about. It's just a really bizarre experience that is so damn hard to, like, describe to other people. Because it sounds absolutely crazy. But the crazy thing is that it's actually a conserved experience amongst human beings. And I'll ask you guys, like I know it's just so weird, but like, you know, I'll talk to people and it's like, hey, did you bend the universe to get that like beta, like to get into that closed beta? And people will be like, yeah, man, I like bent the universe to my will. It doesn't, and some people don't get it at all, which it totally makes sense. So like there are all kinds of scientific reasons for this. It could just be one hell of a bias, right? Could be a confirmation bias. Could be like an availability bias. There are all kinds of psychological reasons why people would think this. Fair enough. I'm not saying that it's actually true. What I'm saying is that it's a damn bizarre, conserved experience across like a decent chunk of humanity. That I think I can scientifically say very cleanly. I'm not saying that it's actually true. I'm not saying that people are actually able to bend the universe to their will. But what I'm saying is that if you really like ask people, it's kind of bizarre, like what percentage of people are like, yeah, I can absolutely do that. And then I ask, then the interesting thing is that you ask like, okay, so can you do that again? And everyone's like, no, I can't. I don't quite know how. And if you talk to these people of their experiences, and now we're really, I warned you guys, like, I know 90% of the time we're on solid scientific foundation. We have left that, we're in deep waters. Like, there be monsters here, chat. Like, this not scientific, okay? So what they sort of, like, it's kind of weird because you have this, like, consciousness. And it's not a thought. It's like this, like, thing that transcends thought. And you kind of point it in a direction, and then the world kind of like conspires to make it happen. Right? It's weird. And so I think this is the closest example for people who've had these kinds of experiences to understand a little bit about how mantra works. Because mantra is operating on whatever level people are operating on there. And it's not thought. And I've worked with people who have been like really, really successful. And when I talk to them, it's not thought, it's not desire, it's like this transcendent intention. And if we think about what transcendent intention means, it's like consciousness. It's like an intention that transcends like everything else. And when you have that transcendent intention in a consistent way, it like aligns stuff sort of in your favor. Now, this is where let's take the skeptical view, and I think this is completely reasonable, is that like when you have that transcendent intention, like it's not that you're actually creating the luck, it's just like you roll the dice over and over and over again because you're not giving up, and then like eventually like you're gonna hit the jackpot. It's just a numbers game, it's a probability game, and if you have that transcendent intention, you're thinking on it, you're working on it, I think absolutely. So that transcendent intention, I do believe, has an effect on motivation in your mind, but that's the transcendent intention having. So I'll put it this way, okay? So I'd say that the transcendent intention manifests in different ways. Come on. There we go. Okay. So now we get to something really tricky, okay? So if I have a transcendent intention, that it manifests within psychology, it manifests within karma or luck, okay? And this is where you can say like, okay, but there are lots of examples of this, right? So like, for example, I have a thought, and a thought has qualities in different buckets. Like, so it has neurons, and it has like a subjective experience. So what we can see is that there are particular things that can ripple out into different buckets. I don't know if that makes sense. So this is my experience of like consciousness and like what all this crap is, because I do this stuff with people, right? Like I'll kind of, we'll talk about this stuff and I'll be like, do you want to try a mantra? And they'll be like, yeah, I want to try it. And it's like, okay, fine. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And this is where, from a scientific perspective, I'm happy teaching the mantra practice because we still know, like, pretty simply that, so for example, right? So we know that, like, mantra meditation, like, is a good, you can prescribe it to people and it's going to help. We know that, like, so here's another paper, that EEG studies on mantra meditation are different from like the EEG that's created through other patterns of meditation. But at the end of the day, the key thing is that like we know that, if I teach my patients how to meditate, like all the pseudo-spiritual BS, pseudo-scientific kind of BS aside, I am still confident that there's piles of evidence that if they do mantra meditation, any kind of meditative practice is going to help them from their HPA axis. Like that's going to work. So I'm confident doing it. And it's like, okay, we know that that benefit is going to happen. If the spiritual stuff happens to be correct, fantastic. And if not, at least we know that there's a good scientific basis that it'll help with your depression and anxiety. Okay? So, then basically just to summarize, like the way that a mantra works is that you're like, here's your mind. And then like your mind has all these fluctuations in it. So the mantra practice is called jap. So the first phase of mantra practice is actually to calm the mind. So when I chant a mantra over and over and over again, now this is very scientifically founded, okay? When I chant the mantra over and over and over again, I have all these different thoughts in my mind. And then when I have the mantra over here, it pushes the rest of it out. This we know for sure. This is what we call dharana. And then our mind is just filled with this. Right? So now, like, all the other thoughts have left. This is the one point in mind. This is like, just like any other meditative practice. When I concentrate on the breath, it pushes all the other thoughts out. So first phase of mantra practice is calming the mind. Then our mind becomes blank. And this is where we get to the cool stuff. Now we have a japa. So japa is the practice of saying a mantra over and over and over again in your mind. And then there's this second tier of practice called ajap, where it's hard to describe. It is when the mantra practice happens automatically without you saying it in your mind. So it's kind of like, I can start to like roll a wheel down the street, but if I give it enough momentum, I don't have to touch it anymore, and it just rolls on its own. So then you have something really bizarre from a conscious and mental state, which is that you have the japa propagating within your consciousness without the activity of your mind, where normally you'd have to repeat it to yourself to have it somewhere within your mind and your consciousness. But if you do japa long enough, then you have the mantra in here without any mental activity. It's weird. And so then once you have the mantra operating past mind entirely, and there's not even the border anymore, it's just that mantric energy. And when you have that mantric energy and you put it out into the universe, it sort of works on that level of transcendent intention. And so this has an effect on your psychology, absolutely. It has an effect on your biology, absolutely. These, we know, are scientifically validated. No question about that. Then it starts to act on your karma. This whole big question mark. This is where we get to, does Brahman and the probability waveform and all that kind of stuff. So this is where, like, this is the best mechanism that I can come up with. I don't know if it's true. There's really no scientific evidence of this. The best argument that I can come up with is that it goes back to this general principle that, like, reality exists as a probability waveform, and that consciousness looking at reality creates a particular manifestation. And the way that I describe this is if you look at like the nature of reality. So if you look at things like the particle wave duality, and now I'm really getting into like pseudoscience because it sounds like it's legitimate, but it really isn't. So take this with a grain of salt. Is that, if I show you a block of wood and I say that, oh, inside this block of wood is a bird. And you're like, okay. And then I chisel the block of wood, and sure enough, on the inside is a bird. And then I show you another block of wood, and I say inside this block of wood is your face. They're like, okay. And then I chisel the block of wood in a different way, and sure enough, there's your face. So we know that like we can kind of see this implication in the particle wave duality, right? If we look for light as if it's a particle, we find a particle. And if we look for light like a wave, we find a wave. But a particle and a wave are fundamentally different things, but maybe they're not, which is what it tells us. And so if we sort of say that light is like this weird neti thing, that's not quite a particle, not quite a wave, and it just gets like really friggin' coincidental. And so what mantra is it's like chiseling that block of wood in a particular way to create a particular manifestation. Questions? If you look for happiness, you find happiness. Incorrect. Looking is of the mind. Right? So what I would say is that if you intend happiness, you find happiness. Yeah, so double slit experiment. Absolutely. The weird thing about the double slit experiment is if you send a single photon through the two slits, you still get the interference pattern. There's nothing for it to interfere with. How do you create interference? The probability of the photon going through one slit, and you guys can correct me if there's a real physicist out there, feel free to call BS and please educate us. But like my understanding of that experiment, which is whack, is that the probability of the photon going through one, And the probability of the photon going through the other is what creates the interference pattern on the other side. And that if I actually check which slit the photon goes through, the interference pattern disappears. That is whack. Do you guys get that? Depending on where I am looking, reality actually shifts. Like, that's weird. So, a lot of people will say that because of these experiments, the tantrics were correct. I don't think that we can actually say that scientifically. I think it's like damn coincidental, but the human mind has a propensity to try to fit some things into other things. Like our mind is designed to make patterns fit together. And sometimes it's just wrong. Like most of the time it's just wrong. And when I talk to my friends who are physicists, they're like, yeah, these people actually, like, I know it sounds like it makes sense, but it doesn't actually make sense. And there's like the height of Dunning-Kruger. So I may be Dunning-Krugering through the roof. Fine. Ultimately, my reliance on mantra practice has nothing to do with any of these, nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with personal experience. So in my experience, mantra practice is ridiculously effective. It's crazy. But that's just my experience. It's completely subjective. It's not objective at all. The reason that we're sharing this stuff today is because a lot of people have questions about how does this stuff work because no one talks about it anymore, because it isn't scientific. And just because it isn't scientific doesn't mean that it isn't true. And this is another big problem with science. So people will say, for example, that medicine is what works. And alternative medicine doesn't work. And when alternative medicine gets verified by science, then it becomes medicine. Okay, people will make this argument. And they're like, yeah, meditation is now part of medicine. So then my question to like these people is like, 50 years ago, before we had evidence that meditation helped depression, was it medicine or was it not medicine? And they'll say like, it wasn't medicine back then. Did it work back then? Yeah. So then like, that means that there are things outside of medicine that work, right? So it's kind of bizarre. So the point here is that it doesn't, just because science hasn't verified something doesn't mean that it isn't effective. Science like works slow. Like it works slowly, but stuff has been working before science agreed. Science just shows up later and is about verification. It's not about really discovery, especially when it comes to medicine. It's like, does it actually work? So the goal of, our talk today, and we'll go to questions in a second, is a lot of people have questions about like this esoteric weird crap. Like, how does mantra work? Like, how does meditation work? Like, what's going on here? And I think that you don't have to believe it, but I think that like it's fine to share the theory of the people who invented mindfulness in the first place. Because like, when I invent something, like maybe I know something about it. And just because as a society we haven't had the chance to test it yet, doesn't mean that it doesn't work before we test it. Like things work before we test them. Testing is just the verification that it works. And case in point, so like here's just an example of like where the science is. So like, if we had gone the chakra route, we would have showed you guys this. So thankfully, finally, like people are starting to study. Oh shit. People are starting to study chakra-specific meditations. Like there's a study going on right now. A buddy of mine is doing a study at UCLA on like heart chakra-specific meditations for depression. And what he's trying to figure out, oh God, camera. Focus. Focus. Does that work? There we go. I'm going to start doing that. So he's doing a study that's sort of checking whether heart chakra-specific meditations are superior to other meditations in terms of depression. Right? So that's where the research needs to go. But let's be very, very careful and actually be scientific and recognize that science has limitations, which is that it tends to move slowly. And there's stuff that has worked long before science told us it worked. It worked forever. It's just we're catching up now. Okay? So now, questions? Are chakras scientifically proven to exist? Absolutely not. Nor do I think we will ever find that they exist, because I don't think they're real things. I think chakras are heuristics. they're patterns of understanding that we use to simplify like phenomenon. Let me give you guys another example. Oh, here's a good one. Does science exist? What is science? Right? So like, it's kind of a weird question. Right. So like chakras are just like science. They're an abstraction, a concept that we use to like organize information and make it make sense. So I think chakras are the same way. So I think what we found is that like, it's not so much that chakras exist, it's just that they use like certain heuristics, which are like tools to help us understand things. And then like they found that when they adhere to these heuristics, that it leads to like real changes. So you can observe the real changes, but the theoretical framework you can't ever prove exists. So for example, like, we can even say something like, you could have a conflict resolution seminar, which will create real world changes that are observable, but conflict resolution does not exist. It's not a thing. It can never be, like, if I were to ask you to prove the existence of conflict resolution, it would be impossible. Just because something can't be proven to exist does not mean that it doesn't have utility that can be verifiable. And this is what we see in yoga and Tai Chi. So yoga and Tai Chi are built on, they're not about exercise, they're built on this idea of chi or prana, this vital life energy, which people have looked for the existence of chi and they haven't found it. I don't think they ever will. But what's interesting is that yoga and Tai Chi are not purely physical. Like, so if you compare yoga and Tai Chi to exercise, what you find is that yoga and Tai Chi are clinically superior to exercise. So there's, even if like prana or chi never exists, that theory is a concept when adhered to, much like conflict resolution, can actually lead to scientifically verifiable changes. So I don't know if was that too like far for you guys? Like it's getting really like deep into theoretical like understanding of like what exists and heuristics and science and crap like that. Right? So something doesn't have to exist for it to have utility, which is a very common misconception when it comes to science. And the more that... Okay. All right, other questions. How did you guys like this? Was this good? Bad? Okay. So I know that sometimes, like, so we try to be careful. I hope for those of y'all who are skeptics, like I'm a skeptic too. And so I'll reiterate once again, I'm not saying that this is scientific. I think that the science will catch up. Because I think that we've sort of also seen, like, I think you can make a calculated bet, like if you're into the stonks, that like the yogis were into something, like they were onto something, right? So most of what they were saying, like, seems to have, I mean, not most, because we haven't really studied most of it. But I would say that there is a consistent pattern that what we have studied well has turned out to be correct. So for example, I don't know if you guys know what a statin drug is, like Lipitor is the trade name in the US, but statin drugs are like the first line treatment for heart disease now. Statin drugs have been used for thousands of years. It's not a discovery of Western medicine. Like, we didn't invent it. People in China have been using statins for 4,000 years. It's called red yeast rice. Like, people knew this stuff a long time ago, and we're just catching up. Okay. Do you base your techniques on this? Getting to the root so it can be accepted and planting new seeds? Sort of. So when I say, do I base my techniques are not homogeneous. I choose the appropriate technique for the appropriate person. So there are some people, and this is the secret, so we do some consulting with people who are in the industries that you guys like streamers and esports professionals and stuff like that. And so we'll see whether like equipping esports professionals with mantras actually leads to an improvement in their performance. It's a scientific study that I'm in the process of running because I'm really curious about that kind of thing. So the techniques, what I do is I look at science, and then I look at the temperament of the person, and then I try to figure out, okay, what does this person need that's scientifically verifiable? And like from the weird esoteric stuff that I'm going to sort of accept this theory for a second, what would help? And the key thing there is that like we're going to definitely do the scientific stuff. But so if science says that meditation works for depression, so we're definitely going to take advantage of that. But science also says that any kind of meditation works for depression. So that's where we're going to try to like get a little bit more value out of the spiritual stuff as well. And if it outperforms, if we do heart chakra meditation and they do better than regular meditation, fantastic. But at the least, we know we're going to get the scientific benefit. So we'll see. Okay. No. So generally speaking, so a lot of people, can you recommend any good books? Unfortunately, not really. So I think the problem is that I don't think good books exist. Like, I mean, there are a lot of good books, like, don't get me wrong, but if people want to know, like, what we shared with you today, you will not find in a book. It's an amalgamation of, like, lots of different books. Like, it's an amalgamation of, like, a, decade of study. So it's tough. I know it's really dissatisfying, but that's why, like, the whole reason that we made these like content modules on meditation is because I have not been able to find a book that I think, not to be arrogant, but teaches it the way that I do. Like, if you guys want to know the way that like I'm teaching it, like you're not going to find that in a book. Like you're not going to find everything that I said in a book. You're going to find it in 10 books, and then like which one do I recommend? Like I'm not sure. Right? So we did write the book. Like that's what this thing, like hopefully, that's what it is. It's like me writing the book. It's like this is the stuff from start to finish. That ego, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. That's fair. So I think it's like if you stop and think about it, like why do we write books in the first place, right? It's because like we're dissatisfied with the current representations of knowledge. This isn't my knowledge. Knowledge is out there. It's just like if you guys want the sort of scientific perspective with the skepticism, with the actual theory, I haven't seen anyone do that. That's what I got curious about, and that's what I went to. And the whole problem, the whole reason that like we started doing this stuff is because I would go, so there's this guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's like one of the seminal researchers on mindfulness. And I was a research assistant at the Osher Center, where he was also sort of based. And I was like a research peon, like one of these intellectual giants who studied mindfulness and are experts on mindfulness and neuroscience and faculty at Harvard Medical School. And I went there and I like studied with some of these people and like learned their perspective and really found that it was like not enough. Like, where's all the spirituality? And then I went to India. And I went to these like, people who were like, this mantra will unlock the inner potential of your life. If you do this mantra, you will get a beautiful wife and you will get lots of money. Do the mantra. And I was like, bro, how does that work? He's like, must have faith. And I was like, what? He's like, faith. I was like, what? Faith. And then he'd spell out Faith. And I'd be like, what, bro? Use the healing power of crystals. You have Shani. I have what? Shani. What is Shani? Saturn. Saturn is destroying your life. Wear this stone and it will be better. And it's like, bro, what are you talking about? And so this is the problem, is like, I don't see, like, it was so damn frustrating being in either place. Because in one place, it's like you're completely ignoring the tradition of meditation and like what these people have been saying for thousands of years. And the other side, like you have people who, don't understand a damn thing about science. And I'm sure that there are people in the middle, but I just haven't found a book that I think like explains this. Like goes into the depth of like studying with these. And then what I did is I was like, all right, fine. Give me your stone and let's go shunny, baby. Let's give it a shot. Might as well. Let's see what happens. And so that's our approach. And like, that's why it's like my synthesis. And if you want to call that ego, that's fine. I honestly have not found a book. Like, we can look. Yeah, like, the problem is that they're different books. Hold on, chat. So like the problem is that they're different books, right? So like Manas, Psychiatry of Ayurveda. So people like, oh, like where's a good book for Ayurveda? Like, do you have any recommendations? Okay, so this is a sentence, okay? Shouting with anger, terrorism with the help of pulsemen, offering gifts. Look at this. Is this policemen? I don't even know. Offering gifts, exhilaration, consolation, fear, and an exhibition of surprising things brings back the natural state of the mind by counteracting the cause of his loss of memory. This is the sentence. Read, chat. And people are like, do you have a book to recommend? And I'm like, no, I don't. This guy doesn't even understand punctuation. But like the whole point is like, I read this crap, sift through it, make sense of it, and then I explain it to y'all. So when people ask me, do I have a book? It's like, sure. For the convenience of the students, a list of all the important topics are included in the appendix. Right? Smriti gets regained with the loss of illusion, and the clarity of intelligence ensues by reading books which increase sattva guna. Okay, cool. And people are like, okay, do you have a book for it? Okay. So now we're going to take a look at this one. Let's see. Another major category of diffuse lesion is hypoxic ischemic injury. Many TBI cases are complicated by systemic injury leading to hypoxia or hypotension. These insults may occur in up to 90% of severe TBI cases and have primary effects on particularly oxygen-dependent areas such as the hippocampus, basal ganglia, and cerebral cortex. Do I love this book? Do I think it's great? Absolutely. Do I incorporate it in what I teach you guys? Absolutely. Would I recommend to read it to you? Absolutely not. Let's just use number 3, pranayama, the art and science. Right? Oh, this is cool. This one's autographed by the author. This dude's dope. Okay. So, mineral world. Prana and manifests. Like, cool. Like, there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's just indecipherable, dude. It's like, you know, just indecipherable. Like, so I know you all want books. That's why we're like doing this whole like Dr. K's guides thing. Okay, like it's like we're gonna explain it to you. So let me just show you all real quick. Okay, I know you guys can sign up somewhere. I don't know where. Maybe there are mods inside that can help you with that. But this is why we have this. Because like what we did is like take all this crap, right? Like this is great. These are great. I love it. Pulsemen. We sift through it, and then we make this. And if you want to say this is egotistical, by all means, I will accept that criticism. But the whole problem is that you have all these books where like people teach one thing. And this is what frustrates me about like learning meditation. It's like, okay, so we talk about, you know, anxiety. It's like, what is an anxiety disorder? Like, let's explain the DSM stuff. Great. Let's talk about it. Okay. And then what we're going to do, I don't know. I can't find the right book. I wanted to show you guys one book. Okay. So, and then we're going to talk about some of these theories, and we're going to talk about the DSM. And then we're also going to talk about like the yogic stuff. And I just don't see anyone presenting that. No one has done it yet. And so when it comes to meditation, it's like, what kind of meditation should I learn? Like, should I do the weird, mystical, spiritual stuff like mantra? Or should I like what about morality and truthfulness? Like, there isn't, like, you can read a book about mantra, but like the tantrics aren't going to talk about truthfulness or satya at all. You know, and then it's like, how do I find, like, what's the difference between my confidence and my ego? Because sure, you can read all this stuff about like truthfulness and like, oh my God, like, be free. But at the end of the day, like, y'all have crap that you need to do and you lack confidence. So you don't give yourself the best option in life. I don't know if you guys can see that. There we go. And then there's also stuff like, you know, like, how do I study effectively? I just don't know of a book that's going to talk about, you know, how to do a mantra and how that works and like how to study effectively. I just don't know of one out there. And it's not like I'm trying to gatekeep the knowledge. In fact, it's the opposite. It's just like, I just don't know like Who talks about that? I don't know. Yeah, so this is where someone is like, one single book might not exist, but a reading list would be really cool, which I can totally get with, and that's what this module is. It's like, the other thing that I realize is that everyone's asking for a book, but like, I don't know if a book is the best way to present the information. So we'll put together a reading list. I'm working on it. It's an ongoing thing. If you guys want to start with something, start with Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I mean, I have books that I recommend, certainly. But the problem is that most of what I teach is not in the books that I recommend, because what I choose to teach is that which cannot be found in a book. Right? Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I have not watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. I am waiting until my children are old enough to watch it so that we can watch it together. But I've heard a lot of good things. So I'm going to watch it with my kiddos. Okay. Yeah. It's going to be new for all of us. It's going to be fun. It's like I've already read Harry Potter like 1,000 times. So we're going to discover this together. I kind of missed the boat on Avatar because I think it happened when I was like maybe in like my late teens or early 20s. So I thought it was a kids show back then. So I kind of like missed that boat. And like now I'm just going to wait. Just watch it with my kids. Oh yeah, we have to teach you guys a practice. Okay, let's learn a practice. Okay, you guys want to learn esoteric practice? Esoteric? We will do esoteric? Okay, we'll do esoteric. Okay. Let me find the right Google image. Sideways. There we go. Okay. Okay, so chat, this is wild. All right, you guys ready for this? This is going to be the Christopher Reeve Foundation. The Christopher and Diana Reeve Foundation has a page on chakras. Okay, that's wild. All right. So, you guys want to learn something weird and esoteric? Oh my God. Zoom out. I don't want to register. How do I close this? I can't. Okay, whatever. What else? Okay. There we go. You can teach an old boomer new tricks. Okay. I'm going to teach you guys a chakra shuddhi meditation, okay? So the chakra cleansing meditation, a couple things y'all have to remember is that, generally speaking, y'all want to steer clear of kundalini meditations. They can be very dangerous if done without the guidance of a guru. This one's completely safe. So, at the same time, if you do have any weird experiences with meditation, you should stop and go see a doctor. But this one is, like, safe. So, remember we were talking about mantras, right? So we're going to transition a little bit to chakras. So here are the chakras. So the interesting thing is that the chakras actually aren't on this side. They're actually back here. So situated all along the spine. And you guys see these like characters here. So these are the Bij mantra for the chakra. So now that you guys understand what mantras are, like, so what they realize is that like the solar plexus governs like some stuff. Wait, what the hell? The solar plexus isn't here. This is the navel. Stupid. Okay. That's what I get for going to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation for information on chakras. Chat. I don't even know why they have that. What is going on? All right. So, sacral, no. This is the pubic chakra. Okay, this is terrible. Let me find something else. It's too bad. I want a side one. There we go. Light. Let's do this one. There we go. This is good. jessicacoaching.blogspot.com. Okay. Okay, this is what we're looking for. What? Navel chakra. Am I wrong here? Am I about to be outdone by the, All right, whatever. So this is Manipura chakra, but let's do the Sanskrit. Interesting. They all call it the solar plexus chakra. Maybe I am wrong. Pinterest. How do I look at this? Yeah, let's just stick with the Sanskrit. Supercharged for life. Okay. So, forget about the names for a second. Okay. So, this is what we're going to do, okay? We're going to do a chakra cleansing practice. And basically what we're going to do is I want you guys, so y'all need to have done some of our meditations before, because otherwise you're not going to understand what the hell I'm talking about. This is the big problem also with teaching meditation on stream, is that we never know like who's done it and who hasn't. So with the Dr. Cade's guides to meditation and mental health, like there are sequential, like we're going to teach you guys like tier 2 and tier 3 practices there. So I know we do like alternate nostril breathing a lot on stream, but there's actually 2 levels of practice beyond alternate nostril breathing that we'll also teach in the guides. And the goal there is that you have to do alternate nostril breathing consistently for a few weeks, and then we'll teach you the advanced practice. Then you do that for a few weeks, and we teach you the tier 3 practice, okay? So this is a more advanced practice. For those of you who have done the like following your breath in your body, it's going to really help a lot, okay? Yeah, I think NAMA is a good organization. I know the folks at NAMA pretty well. Okay, so what does root chakra meditation look like? Okay, I'll give you guys a really simple introduction to root chakra meditation. So root chakra meditation, you guys know that like when you're peeing and how to stop your stream mid-flow? You guys know what I mean? Yeah, Kegels. Yep. So Kegels are a good example of a root chakra meditation. Or like, meditation isn't right, but like it's like a meditative practice. When you start with the root chakra, you basically do Kegel exercises. So we're not going to do that today. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something called Chakra Shuddhi. Shuddhi means cleansing. Chakra means chakras. So what we're going to do when we breathe in is you're going to pay attention to the sensation of the breath in your nose. And then you're going to feel it go up to your eyebrow center. And then through that breath, basically what we're going to do is we're going to follow the breath up this way and then down through the throat. We're going to follow the breath all the way into the chest, into the navel, up to the pubic symphysis, which is the top of your like hip bone, and then down into the perineum. And the perineum is also known as the taint, or the area that's halfway between your anus and your genitals. Okay? So when we breathe in, what we want to do is like feel that breath. You're going to feel it kind of go up, and then like kind of feel ideally or imagine it kind of going up to your eyebrow center, and then through your throat to the center of the chest, to the navel, to the pubic symphysis, down to the perineum. And then as you exhale, we're going to follow the breath back up the spine and feel the warmth out the nose. Does that make sense? My God. I'm so sorry, mods. I did not realize what I would do to you. Thank you all so much. Okay. So does that make sense with people? If it doesn't, sorry. This is an esoteric practice. You have to have done stuff with us before to really get it. But like, we never teach this stuff. So today's like our non-scientific day. Today's our day that we're going to teach the stuff that the people who consistently come in are curious. We're going to do something for you guys, because y'all are the neglected bunch. Okay, so sit up straight, back straight. Imagine, or ideally feel, that sensation of coolness go up to your eyebrow center, through your throat, the pit of your throat, into the middle of your chest where your solar plexus is, down to your navel, then the top of your pubic bone, your pubic symphysis, which is where your hip bones kind of connect, and then down to the bottom, the perineum, and then go, as you exhale, go up the back. And what we're going to do is 7 breaths. You can adopt a mudra with your hands. So I would recommend, for those of you who want to be grounded, I would say chin mudra, put it face down on your knees. For those of you, I forget what the other one is. For those of you who want more to cultivate, if you guys like need stuff materialistically, do face down or hands down. If you guys want stuff, like if materialistically y'all are doing okay and like you're kind of mentally okay and you want like spiritual growth, then like hands up. Okay? For those of you who want to go for a more hardcore spiritual mudra, like if you want to be like one of these, like, I want to like get enlightened and like do this stuff legit, like I want to, you know, unlock my spiritual energy, you guys can do Bhairava mudra, which is this. So this is the mudra of the god Shiva. Bhairava translates, for those who are curious, is fierce or terrifying. So it's sort of like the hardcore mudra for people who want to do hardcore meditation. Okay? Yeah, baby. Yeah, so for those of you who are Super Saiyan, I know like we sort of joke about it, right? But like some people are like that, and there are like practices for people who want to be hardcore. It's sort of like when you know, like, are you playing ranked or are you playing unranked? Like, you playing for fun and lulls, or are you like playing like ranked and we're going to climb to the top of the ladder? If you're a climb to the top of the ladder in terms of meditation person, Bhairava mudra is for you. If you're like trying to get, you know, stuff under control, which is fine. Like, don't go for the hardcore stuff if you're not ready yet. Bhairava mudra is for people who are like mentally stable, financially independent, good in their relationships. If all of your stuff is taken care of and you want to meditate for the purpose of becoming enlightened, then do Bhairava mudra. Okay? I'll spell it. No? I don't know. I don't know what you guys... I don't... Depends, okay? So we're going to do 7 rounds, all right? So I'll guide you guys through like the first one, and then y'all continue on your own. So as you breathe in through your nose, feel the cool breath going up to your eyebrow center, and then through your throat, down to the middle of your chest, through your navel, through your pubis, down into your perineum. And now as you exhale, go up the back of the spine. And you want to focus on each point that is opposite the frontal points. Let it out through the spine. And now breathe again. Go to the eyebrow center, pit of the throat, heart, navel, pubis, perineum, and then up the back of the spine. We'll do one more round together. Take a deep breath in. Eyebrow center, throat, chest, navel, pubis, perineum, and up the back of the spine. And now we'll practice for 7 more breaths at your own pace. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and come back? What does it mean if you feel out of breath? It means that you should do other practices first. There's a reason this is an advanced practice. It's fine. If you did 3 instead of 4, that's probably better. It's okay. It's not about the number. It's about the level of the conscious state that you're in. A little bit of science. So you need about 20 minutes of practice to start to see clinically significant improvements in whatever you're studying, basically. Rheumatoid arthritis, depression, anxiety. So shoot for 20 minutes of practice. So. Sure. So let's think about this. So we see a lot of different things, okay? Some people are like, my perineum felt warm, I yawned a lot, so let's talk about yawning. So if you're yawning, that means you probably need to sleep. Not during your meditation practice, but it means like, so as we start to enter the calm state of mind, as we start to enter the state of mind of dhyan, our body does this little check, where if we're sleep deprived, we'll start to yawn. So you probably need to get higher quality or quantity of sleep. Some people may feel relaxed, lightheaded, calm, totally fine. Some people are noticing they didn't feel anything, which is also totally fine. And then some people found that there's like a particular weird feeling in a particular place. So back of my head feels weird. My perineum is warm. I could feel the different points. My throat felt inflamed. Like all this weird kind of stuff. Okay? And so then the question is like, what is going on there? So I want you guys to just think about this, okay? How do you imagine the yogis came up with the idea of chakras? Like, where does this come from? Like, how did they just like sit there and like, it'd be cool, like, I'm going to develop this idea. It's going to be chakras. It's going to be great. We're going to do chakras. So I think what they discovered is that as they did these practices, they started to have particular sensations in particular places. And that they started to correlate particular sensations they had with certain kinds of qualities. And what they found is that when they did this practice, people who had like blockages in the Muladhara chakra, the bottom chakra, the base chakra, had different kinds of problems and challenges than people who felt something in the throat. So the best that I can do is like, how did they come up with all this stuff? They must have done it through observation. Because that they sort of, they had an advantage over us, is that they figured this stuff out over thousands of years of like painstaking observation, of teaching lots and lots of students. And I think they correlated stuff. And so if you guys felt a particular thing, I think it's totally fine. Like, go ahead and continue doing the practice. That is what the yogi hippies will say, like, you are cleaning out your chakra. That's the sensation of cleaning, your blockage. Blockage. You know blockage? Blockage. Call plumber. He will get you out of the laundry machine. Okay? Okay. So you can go ahead and continue the practice. If anything becomes painful or like very uncomfortable, I wouldn't continue. But by all means, you can do this practice. Now, remember, for those of you who are like, I had trouble doing it or I didn't feel anything or anything, that's fine. Do other practices first. This is really a more advanced practice. And that's it for today, chat. You guys like that? We did? We good? We done? GG'd? Okay. All right. Who should we raid, chatars? Does the 20 minutes have to be all at once? Yes. So you don't have to start with 20 minutes, but generally speaking, there have been studies that look at like 5 minutes of meditation 4 times a day versus 20 minutes at a stretch. 20 minutes at a stretch seems to be more efficacious than 5 minutes, several times a day. We rated Ludwig last time. I think we wanted it was a tiny one, little streamer. So you guys don't have to do this practice for 20 minutes a day, but you can do like alternate nostril breathing for 5 minutes. You can do bellows breath or Kapalbhati for 5 minutes, and then you can do this practice, Chakra Shuddhi, afterward. Or you can do like 5 minutes of this, 10 minutes of the Chakra Shuddhi practice, and then I'd end with like 5 minutes of Om chanting. So you can kind of combine them in different places. Garbage Brain University. Hold on. Let's check out Garbage Brain University. That sounds too interesting. Wait, is Patrick Rothfuss streaming? Okay, let's we're gonna so we have about 30 meditation practices that are more sequential in the Dr. K's guides. They're also scattered throughout YouTube. We're definitely gonna rate. Let's rate this as Garbage Brain University, dude. This guy is whack. Looks like he's about to imbibe something. I don't know what is happening, but he looks wild. Send the Garbage Brain University some love. We'll see you guys later. Take care.